Hey movie fans, Demetri Panos here for Popcorn Talks Anatomy of a Movie, where today we try to break a glass ceiling. Talk soon.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk, we talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
Hello movie fans, and talk movies we shall. And today for Anatomy of a Movie, we're going to talk about Glass. Glass, the third in a trilogy that no one knew was happening until Split came out, and now we've capped it off with Glass. I have a great host. It's your second time on Anatomy of a Movie, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Mina, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here.
And where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Mina Makes Magic, or go to my website, minamakesmagic.com.
That's minamakesmagic.com. I like that. Very nice. We also have a special guest in studio, Mina's mom, who is not on camera, but she's here watching. Hopefully she doesn't fall asleep while doing so. But hello, welcome. So we are going to talk about Glass, a very interesting movie, a movie that begs, I think, of discussion. So as we open up every single show, we are going to start off with our opinions. So Mina,
yeah.
What did you think of Glass?
I actually liked it, despite the really harsh critiques from the film critics. I came into it without having seen Unbreakable, only having seen Split, and I enjoyed Split. I thought it was a very M. Night Shyamalan movie, and I thought this movie had a lot of twists. And I wasn't exactly sure where it was headed, but I liked to see the interaction between the three key players, and I really did not know what Samuel Jackson's character would be because I didn't see Unbreakable.
Understood.
Yeah.
Which then before I give my opinion, so you I remember talking to you about Split. This was a few weeks ago when we were deciding what shows we were going to do.
Yeah.
So the ending of Split really meant nothing to you. Because you didn't understand.
I didn't piece it together the way you would if you had seen Unbreakable.
Right. Because, so the diner scene, and you just said, the hell's Bruce Willis doing in this movie?
I honestly, that didn't register with me at all. I just thought, okay, he's been in another M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Right.
Didn't really make the connection there.
So Glass, did Glass as either a standalone movie then, did it tie things in for you to... Like, did you figure things out easily? Like, did it tie in the characters in a way where, I mean, you didn't see Unbreakable, but were you still able to parse out this movie? Did it bring all these characters together in a way that you understood?
It did, and I think the way I saw it was I can still have a firm understanding of this movie. I just don't have a backstory of two very key players, but I don't feel like I need that backstory to understand the movie.
Okay.
I just feel like it would have added more context for me, but I still enjoyed it regardless.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it because I did not. So I'm glad somebody on the panel enjoyed the movie. Yeah, for me, this movie, first off, huge fan of Unbreakable, and we're gonna talk about each of the movies that are in this universe. I wasn't a big fan. I was a huge fan of Unbreakable, not a big fan of Split. Due to the marketing of Glass, I went into this movie with actually high hope. I was looking forward to it, and then I saw the movie, and the movie got worse for me as it went along, and it just seemed to ruin all of what Unbreakable stood for, and it seemed to do it in a silly. It got lost in some, like, just narrative stopping, painful exposition and nonsensical character motivation, and it was just a mess of a third act for me. And at the end of the day, it just made me. The more I thought about it, the more it just made me angry. So we are going to talk about a lot of various plot points because I think whether you like M. Night Shyamalan or not, he builds his movies around plot points and twists. Right? Would you agree?
I mean, The Village was the first M. Night Shyamalan movie I ever saw when I was younger. And I was a child when I saw it. I was, I think, in 4th grade. So I kept thinking, what is going on here? And when I saw the end, I was like, oh wait, so they're in a completely they're
Right.
like Amish people in a sense.
Right.
So yeah, I
So-
remember that was my first taste of M. Night Shyamalan growing up.
Yeah, and not much really with his narrative has changed much. And I should have said this at the top of the show, but for those people who may not have watched Glass, fair warning, we are going to spoil the hell out of it. We're going to talk about various plot points. So you may want to watch the movie first and then come back and take our breakdown and listen to it and then comment. Some people actually do watch our show before watching the movies, which is sort of kind of cool. I appreciate that. But a movie like Glass, which really does rely on various plot twists, if people voluntarily do it, that's fine, but I don't want people to get
Yeah.
upset at me for not saying.
Because then you go
reverse
into it
spoiler.
with a completely
Right.
different idea of what's
Correct.
going on without having the ups
Right.
and downs of that roller coaster ride.
So let's talk a little bit about the history of, let's talk about this universe for a little bit before we really start talking Glass. So it all began with David Dunn in Unbreakable. And for me, Unbreakable is really a beautiful film and homage and love letter to comic books. From beginning to end. For you fans out there, I'm sure if you've watched Unbreakable, and I hope you agree, that it really, from a cinematography standpoint, from the way that the movie looked and from the way that the movie played out and its twist at the end, it is an origin story of a superhero, David Dunn, or who becomes the overseer. And it was just the way in which the movie was shot and told. It was M. Night Shyamalan's love letter to the visual medium of comics. Each scene was framed like a comic book panel. Whether you got that or not, if you go back and you rewatch, it really is a beautiful film that unfolds, and you see each plot point coming in. It is a superhero coming in his own. And it really, and when it plays out, you go, it's a superhero movie. And again, Shyamalan took such great, he just really took great pride in detail about how he shot Unbreakable and the way that it looked, that if you read comics, if you didn't read comics, fine, it still works. But if you're a lover of comics and how a comic book tells a narrative in a sense, because the movie starts off with a whole explanation about the history of the visual form from hieroglyphics that tells stories. That's today the modern comic book, and how it tells stories from visual, adding in words and a narrative, but a lot of it's a visual narrative, how those panels are put on the page to convey narrative and motion and movement. That's what Unbreakable was. And I still think that Unbreakable is perhaps his best film, in my dopey opinion. So
even Quentin Tarantino said it was one of his top 20 films that inspired him as a director.
yeah,
And this came out 19 years ago, and it's still, a lot of people's favorite superhero movie, and I can't believe I haven't seen it yet.
yeah, I mean, you really need to. And again, it's predicated on a twist. It is predicated on a slower narrative. I mean, this is the way M. Night Shyamalan worked. So, but you absorb it all in, and if you look at it, if you are a person who reads comics, and I think those people who watch the show, I think you agree that the movie was a visual comic book in which shots and scenes were framed and paneled much like they might be in a graphic novel. And to me, that was part of the beauty of watching the events unfold in Unbreakable. Then we get to Split. And Split was marketed as somewhat of a quasi multi-personality horror movie in a sense, and for the most part that delivers. Were introduced to Henry, what is James McAvoy's character's name? I believe it's like Henry. Kevin Wendell Crumb.
Yes,
I keep
Kevin
on thinking it's
Wendell.
Henry. Kevin Wendell Crumb.
Yeah.
and his multiple personalities, and he kidnaps teenage girls, and all his personalities lead up into the one big bad, the Beast. And you think it's a multi-personality movie in which he has a psychologist who's trying to figure him out, and then they throw in this twist at the very end of Split that says, oh, wait a minute, what the hell is Bruce? Oh, this is in the Unbreakable universe. Okay, so it's like, oh, so he's a villain, but Unbreakable already had Glass, or Mr. Glass. So yeah, for me, that throwing that twist in at the very end was, I wasn't a fan.
I wouldn't even necessarily characterize him as a villain, though. I think it's Kevin Wendell Crumb's character. I mean, the Beast is a villain, but I don't think we can look at him as just one identity. I think his identity is multifaceted
he's
because of the split personality.
Right. But he becomes the Horde, which is a great comic book villain group name. So he's like the League of Doom all wrapped up in one person.
Yes.
He has all these multifaceted, multi-personalities to him that lead up to, who are all afraid of the big bad, which is the Horde, or the Beast, leading up to, the physical transformation. So now we come into Glass. So in this trilogy, we had a David Dunn movie. We had a Beast movie, or Kevin Wendell Crumb in all of his personalities. And so to round everything out, we have to have a movie about Glass. So here we are with Samuel Jackson's character. And this, to me, was interesting. He's in prison, all right? And it starts off with David Dunn. Glass starts off with David Dunn as the overseer. He's become somewhat like a Batman. He's a vigilante superhero. Cops see him as a vigilante. The people of Philadelphia find him as a hero. And he's looking for the Beast. At the end of Split, he sees what this Beast is, and he believes he's the only one that can stop this menace from murdering teenage girls. Right. So he's on the prowl. He's on the hunt. I actually thought the first 10, 15 minutes of Glass were probably some of the best. I enjoyed seeing his son come back into the picture. I thought the kid was, why isn't this kid acting? He did a good job, right? And I like the father-son duo.
Yeah.
They mentioned they lost the mother. It's sort of kind of funny that they run and operate a security store. So, and I like this, and I was like going, okay, how are we going to get to Glass? Like, where's Glass? What's Mr. Glass doing? And they spent so much time advertising and the marketing.
Yes, that's exactly what I thought going into it. I was like, where is Samuel Jackson?
Right.
This whole movie was marketed in a way where we see so much of Samuel Jackson, and I keep thinking, how are their paths going to cross?
Right.
I haven't seen Unbreakable, so I don't know what role he's going to play, although it's assumed that he will be a villain. And I was trying to piece that together as we went along in the film.
And he's a great character, especially in Unbreakable, because in a sense, he's mentoring, in a sense, David Dunn. He recognizes the special uniqueness that David Dunn has as a superhero, and he's a comic book person. And then at the end of Unbreakable, you realize that that Glass was the person who was responsible for the train wreck in which is alluded to in Glass, but that Unbreakable opens on.
And also that shaped the identities of both of the key players in this movie.
Absolutely. So, to me, we get into... So then from there, we go to the Overseer finds the Horde, finds the lair of the Horde, finds the Beast, comes across, and then we're getting to a really great part, like we're a knockout, drag-out fight between Mr. Unbreakable And like, I don't know why they didn't go with that name. That's a really cool comic book name, Mr. Unbreakable.
Yeah, as opposed to the Overseer.
As the Overseer, Mr. Unbreakable. The movie was called Unbreakable. So, but it was a really good fight. And then lo and behold, we're introduced to a new character.
The psychiatrist.
Yes, the new, and played by Sarah Paulson, who she was fine. Dr. Ellie Staple. Mm-hmm. We don't know who she is, and they end up being brought into. I mean, there was no due process. There was no like. It's like
it felt
there's
like
no due
we're
process.
back in the
Like,
1920s.
boom, you're
in a
put into a
psychiatric
psychiatric
ward.
ward,
Yes.
which is Philadelphia's Arkham Asylum. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Ellie Staple here is going to fix their problem.
Right.
They have a psychiatric problem. They either think they're a superhero or a villain. She's going to cure them of these delusions of grandeur, as I believe she called them in the movie. So, and here is where we are introduced to Glass. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Glass has been in, he's been in this institution for the better part of 16 plus years, ever since the ending of Unbreakable. And here's what things started, get fluey for me is like, he's been there all this time. It's leading to an ending like...
To suicide mission. That's basically what it is. And what I thought...
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. We'll get to the ending, but that would mean he masterminded their capture? Like, he had no idea that they were both going to be brought into prison or brought into this mental institution. Dr. Ellie Staple is... she's a wild card. Like, he had no idea she was coming into this prison for that short time to psychoanalyze and to bring these three characters, Glass, the Horde, Beast, and David Dunn. So that was like the first thing going on. And I don't know, for me, and while I enjoyed the parts of the psychoanalyzation, especially bringing the three of them from a cinematography point of view, it really showcased off the color palette. Glass was purple, the yellow, the green, like all in one room, but it was done very subtle, very well done. And then it became sort of a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest type of film in which M. Night Shyamalan says that movie was an inspiration for him doing this in the mental hospital and having a character try to escape the bond. But to me, Sarah Paulson or Dr. Ellie here was no Miss Ratchet, so to speak.
Right.
So I enjoyed that part, and then the middle just kind of meandered for me. It went on far too long in the hospital, and we do see that Glass wants to hook up with the other the bad guys getting together, which is a popular comic book trope of bad guys coming together to team up to take down the superhero.
Right. And we also see the reverse of superheroes coming together to fight for the common good.
That's what the Avengers are all about in Justice League. But there are great examples in comic book history of bad guys bonding, coming together to defeat the one common enemy.
Right.
But Glass's motivation was not just that. He just wanted to see the fight of the century. He wanted to bring these out to light, right? I mean, is that what you caught?
I caught that, but I also felt like there was a redeeming quality at the very end once we see the twist. So that's why I feel like it's, even though he is a villain, it's hard to portray him as strictly just a villain when he had a mission for people to know the truth of their powers. Whether or not he wanted that knowledge for good or evil, I mean, it can be assumed that it might be for evil, but that's not for us to decide.
It can be. I mean, it's part of our conversation as to, I mean, because in a sense, well, he is revealed to be the villain in Unbreakable. He's not mentioned and or seen, if I recall, in Split. And his motivations here are, yes, is that people have powers, and you folks, when this twist comes out, this I don't know what that is. Somebody's calling me? No. It's okay. We'll call you back. The movie, I don't know. It just, again, there are so many different kinds of twists here. Number one, Glass keeps on talking about there's a new building in Philadelphia, this high rise, and he keeps on talking about how he's going to do this big, big reveal on this big high rise. We anticipate a big fight to happen there. That never happens.
Right.
Then it's pairing up the bad guys to fight the good guy. The good guy and a bad guy fight while Glass watches, and everything is being filmed for this. And you're right. His motivation is to let the world know that there are people out there who have abilities.
Yeah.
So, and to break that open to the world. Meanwhile, though, we come to find out that our lovely Dr. Ellie Staple is part of some Shamrock cabal. Then this comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, that was the twist that was so... I was like, where is this coming from? And it's... Yeah, it kind of blindsided me for a second, because I was not expecting that twist at all. I actually thought... A lot of people hated that twist. I actually liked that twist of... it kind of reminds me of that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, where you don't know whether the people taking care of you are really taking care of you because you have a mental illness.
Are we talking... not Inception. You're talking
not
about
Inception.
The one when he was in,
yes.
Based off of... you're right. Right now...
it's not coming to mind right now.
It's based off a novel. Yeah, right now.
Shutter Island.
Shutter Island.
Yeah, where we're not sure whether this is someone who's taking care of you or whether we question authority in this movie. So I thought it was an interesting twist that the people who you think are trying to help you might have ulterior motives.
But they're part of a cabal that obviously loves fine dining, but they hate superheroes. And that to me just why do you have to have a meeting in a restaurant? Why do you have to wait for the last customer to leave before ding ding, and then just rent just rent a hall, an Elks Lodge. I didn't quite understand that, and the whole Shamrock thing, it reminded me, sadly, of it just comes out of nowhere, much like it was a plot point in one of the Halloween movies, in Halloween 5, where all of a sudden Michael Myers has a tattoo in his arm, and there are and it's what is going... what the hell? So they're in restaurants. They can't go to other places to meet. So, and then they dislike the notion of superheroes or people with abilities, and we're going to eradicate the world. So they're almost like a Lex Luthor in a sense.
It's more about them wanting to keep world order. I think their fear is that if knowledge of your superpowers comes to light, that this power could be used for evil and not good. So the superhero could potentially become the supervillain. So we don't know whether their reasons are pure or if they're motivated by some sort of evil, because they're trying to keep the world in balance.
I get that,
yeah.
But there was perfect balance. We had a good guy and a bad guy
because of them, potentially.
It had nothing to do with them. They weren't even mentioned in Unbreakable, or you don't see these people. Mm-hmm. There's a really interesting twist to throw in within the last 15 minutes of the movie. Personally, I'm not a fan of throwing something into the movie at the very, very end where, number one, it's not like a mystery.
Right.
And you're just throwing in another plot narrative or a plot element. And I was like, really? This makes no sense. And it ruined Sarah Paulson's character because, number one, I considered her character a villain. I considered her a villain throughout the entire movie. And I was hoping that the movie was going to get to a point where she really got her comeuppance and perhaps was even killed by the Beast before Mr. Unbreakable could save her.
Why did you consider her a villain before knowledge of the organization that she was a part of? What made her a villain?
Because of her unwillingness to accept these people's story and not seeing the proof that was in front of her of what they both were capable of doing. So when a man can really transform his body from being this meek grandmotherly type of a woman or to a 9-year-old boy and then become this beast who can scale walls, when the proof is in the pudding, when it's right there and you deny it and you're telling them you have a problem, this is all in your head. And when Glass, who literally he is a Lex Luthor in his mind, he's a very smart man. His ability is that he's smart. His disability is that his bones break. They're so brittle. But when you can't see this and you deny that there's anything wrong and you try to make those people think that there's something psychologically wrong with them, that to me, she was being a villain. She was like, I don't believe you. I have you in a psychiatric ward because I think you're crazy. And like, this is something that's all in your head. You don't have superpowers, even though she's seen and she knows there's superpowers because that's why she's in Philadelphia in the first place, to root them out.
Right.
And that to me was villainous because you're trying to make people not believe in their ability or capability. And for a doctor, listen, a doctor should help root out evil things. Like if somebody's a serial killer, you want to get to the root of why that is. She can't take away that the horde wasn't killing teenage girls, right? You want to help that. But when somebody's doing good, you don't want to dissuade them from doing good. And to me, it was all about breaking them down. And it was like, well, just because you don't believe that people can have an ability doesn't mean it's not so. And as a psychiatrist, if you're trying to break these people down, you're not really doing your job. That's why I found her villainous, so that she was really doing more harm than good to somebody like a David Dunn, who had learned of his ability, and he took it upon himself that he was the only one that could try to track down the horde. The horde became the beast because of, as we found out, what happened to him as a child,
right?
And all the various personalities, and he became this beast and feeding on impurity, so to speak, or purity, because
he only valued those who were impure, who could understand where he came from. And that's why he never killed the girl in Split, because he saw in her what he saw in himself.
Right. So, but that person, there's a reason for, like, we know that if you're having multiple personalities, something's not really right. But set in this world of being a superhero, why, again, you're taking down these people who have an ability instead of trying to encourage a more positive way to use this ability.
Right.
And that to me, like, she just looked, to me, she was the villain, more of a villain and the threat to Glass and to the Horde and the Beast and Kevin and David Dunn and what he was doing. She was trying to take all that away from them. And that was just part of their nature. Glass was just at least very smart. Again, but I'm just trying to figure out what Glass was doing. Why was he in prison for
19 years?
You're right, for 19 years.
Why was he just... Well, my argument would be, and this is me honestly just playing devil's advocate.
Sure.
If Glass had the foresight to create the Beast by orchestrating a train wreck, maybe he had the foresight to bring them all together later on, 19 years later.
But am I wrong in figuring that he didn't realize that he actually made the Beast?
He did realize that, though. Because
How long?
Because he had the whole conversation at the end where he said this is what made you the beast. If this
Right.
didn't happen and this didn't happen, it's like the butterfly effect. And if you were not abused by your mom, you would never be the beast and you would have never unlocked your full potential. And I wanted to see that for myself.
Didn't he find that information at the hospital when he looked up who
That
Kevin
was the part,
was?
yeah.
Right? So
He was
didn't
going through
know.
the files
Right.
and trying to figure out who was in the room. That's the only part that I couldn't figure out. So you don't know who's in the room with you.
Right.
Or maybe he wanted to verify that his plan was working all along.
But it was almost like when he saw it, he was surprised.
Mm-hmm.
That, oh my God, he didn't know
Right.
that little, Kevin, what is it? He didn't know that Baby Crumb was on that train until he looked him up.
Right.
And he said, oh my God. He goes, Jesus, I created a hero and a villain.
Right.
At that time. So because Unbreakable, he focuses on David because he was the sole survivor of this. But
He never realizes that Kevin Wendell Crumb was another result
right,
of the
because he wasn't
same
on the
thing.
train. He wasn't
Right.
a passenger on the train.
Right. He was just affected by someone who had passed away and how that
Right.
affected the mother.
Right, which is interesting, but he had no way of. He didn't know
Right.
that. He didn't know who that little kid was.
There would
back-
be no way to know that
Right.
until you see the results of your action and trace it back to
Exactly.
one moment in time.
Exactly. So that's where he concocts the idea of we're going to, look. So there's three of us now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be more than just the three. And
Right.
at least his belief, and his belief has always been that. Now, what he's been doing for 19 years, I have no idea why he wouldn't try to orchestrate an escape from before, or maybe he did and he's all doped up. But yeah, so then we move to the fight scene, like the escape.
The one in the parking lot. Right.
Yeah, where where Glass orchestrates an escape. He somehow figures out, there's if I can't change you, I'm gonna lobotomize you.
Right. Another One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest
Right.
reference.
And via laser, and he, although not knowing what this is, he was able to take out the lens so he doesn't get lobotomized. This is all part of his grand scheme. And I get it. Like, a smart villain's supposed to be a step ahead, but I don't know, it just didn't make sense to me.
I think we're just supposed to ignore the mechanics of it and just accept it as this is just the way it is because it's M. Night Shyamalan, so we just have to blindly agree with the plot.
And that's what bothered me about the movie, especially especially with a movie like Unbreakable, which so set up things so beautifully and so nicely. Like, I wouldn't have minded seeing another David Dunn movie as the overseer of Mr. Unbreakable. Like, that would have been kind of cool to pair him up again with Elijah and or Glass. I wouldn't have minded that. It's just we never get that movie. In this movie, Unbreakable works because whether you are a fan of comic books or not, you can still understand the movie, right? There's no silly over-the-top exposition where Split goes in and just thinks the audience doesn't even know what a comic book is. So throughout the entire movie, there are characters that literally stop the narrative to tell you what's going on. Oh, well, this is where the villain does this, and this is where we're gonna fight and have and to me, I was like going, yeah, I'm watching it happen. You don't need to explain it to me. And I think the scene that really got me the most was when our dear doctor was in a comic book shop, and there were two kids, and they just happened to be talking so loud. Oh, well, the mastermind always has a plan. And I'm like going,
and then and then there's the light bulb moment where she's like, oh, so wait, maybe I wasn't as smart as I thought. Maybe the mastermind had it all figured out.
Mastermind always has, and I'm like,
what are the chances?
Oh my God, like you're telling me you're explaining things that really don't need explaining if you've done a good job fleshing out your characters.
Right.
And if I understand motive and whatnot.
But I also think it's not just exposition that ruins this for you necessarily. I think it's the fact that Unbreakable set such a precedent in the eyes of you and the eyes of several people that because it's one of M. Night Shyamalan's best work, you don't go into this with a fresh pair of eyes. So for me, I have such a different perspective from you because I can enjoy this separately without having been influenced by Unbreakable, without having seen it as one of the best superhero movies of all time.
I don't even say it's the best superhero movie of all time. I do say it's one of his best movies of all time. But when you're painstakingly spending so much time to set this universe up,
Right.
set it up to, like, if you made something so great, aspire to be that great. Don't like fall off the edge of a cliff, and like don't, like, your audience understood Unbreakable, and then you come up with Split, and then you just throw that Mickey in at the end saying, oh, guess what, I'm in the Unbreakable universe, and that comes out of, like, nowhere. Some people liked it, some people didn't. But over here, it just seemed all the goodwill that was attained through Unbreakable and setting up that world, this becomes like the anti-world of that. And then we get, there's the fight, and Glass wants to use the technology that was put in for him, basically, to use it against the people. And then we come to find out, as we're being told, there's going to be a fight. There's going to be a fight at the top of this building, tallest building in Philadelphia. There's going to be a fight. Going to be a fight.
Never mind.
Never a fight. And it makes me wonder, was that budgetary? Like, did we, because that too would have been broadcast throughout all of the entire world to see, or at least all of Philadelphia, but that would have gotten news coverage there. But we instead have a fight on the grounds of Philly's Arkham Asylum.
Right.
Which, the fight didn't work. I thought the fight at the beginning of the movie was better. Like, I was more thrilled by that.
There was more anticipation, and in a lot of ways, even though it was just for cheerleaders, it felt like there was more at stake for some reason. There was anticipation. You didn't know what was going to happen. The setting was different because it's not to use any sort of pun or double meaning, it wasn't in the light.
Right.
It was in the dark.
You're right.
And you really had no idea what the Beast would do. You're kind of anticipating, is he going to go after the cheerleaders? Is he going after Bruce Willis's character? How will this play out? And then you have, like, this anticipation, and then they're somehow just captured by this psychiatrist.
Right.
And we're like, how did this happen? And how is it that they were not able to see the good in Bruce Willis's character to not take him in?
Right.
That was the part that was so frustrating for me, was seeing that it's so night and day who
is
good is and who bad is. And it was frustrating that they would put Bruce Willis, his character, right across from James McAvoy's character in the same area and have him constantly asking, oh, there's no security for this guy, kind of insinuating also in the script, why is there no security for this person? You're making it so easy for someone to break out.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%, and I think what you brought up something which says a lot. There were stakes in that first fight. There were the 4 cheerleaders, and the overseer here is there to save them. Where at the final brawl, there were no stakes. It was just
the 2 girls in the car who were actually let go early on, and Bruce Willis's character bends the steel to protect the other SWAT team members. So everyone is, actually safe except for themselves. So maybe that was what M. Night Shyamalan was trying to prove, that the biggest stake is themselves and their own livelihood. Because if one of them escapes, this could alter the universe as we know it because of the butterfly effect that was talked about in that same exact scene.
Sure, but those stakes were random. Like, they came up, it was basically, they were meant to escape to fight.
Right.
To have, the
Instead of
brawl
just
this-
fighting inside
it
where
was
they
like
they
right.
were. It's like,
Yeah, it was.
let's take this outside.
And we're gonna have it all done on video camera, so that I can release this to the world, and it'll go viral.
Mm-hmm.
And the other twist for me, which again I just didn't. Everybody dies
Right.
at the end.
And not necessarily in the most satisfying of ways, to be drowned.
In a puddle of water, which
Yeah.
Unbreakable did set up that. And again, it was set up in such a great way that, well, every superhero has a weakness. Superman has his kryptonite. Batman doesn't want to fall in love. He has this weakness for that. Or David Dunn's weakness is water. Like he can drown in a teacup or in a thimble of water. That's what weakens him. That's his kryptonite. So we understood that, but
But the monster is shot with a bullet. The beast is
Right.
shot with a bullet.
Right.
And then it just wasn't a super satisfying way to
No.
go. Especially when you have a buildup where Anya Taylor-Joy's character is trying to form this relationship with him.
Right.
Which is some weird Stockholm syndrome
this is okay.
stuff going on.
I'm so
but
glad you
supposed to
brought
be
her up.
endearing at the same time. And I can't understand why you would go to your captor when you have nothing to gain from it, and why a psychiatrist would put you in that situation, and that wouldn't be a red flag at all if you're a psychiatrist
Yeah.
to bring the person who's a victim of abuse into the same situation to relive a trauma that wasn't that old. Keep in
No.
mind 2016, 2019, a 3-year-old trauma.
Yeah.
And she's already witnessing him on the news capturing people, but she still makes the conscious decision to go back. That's what was so mind-blowing
I
for me.
wanted to talk about that as well, because it just defies logic, period. And for a character that, like, there was no sense of that in Split. Like,
Right.
There was nothing that was even hinted that there was an admiration there. Mm-hmm. And
that's the crazy thing, is
Right.
that James McAvoy's character alludes to that when the first time he talks to her
Yeah.
in one of his character voices. You were trying to escape this whole time, and now you're back.
Right.
Even his character, who's one of the most illogical characters, finds this to be completely insane and
Yeah.
incongruent with human nature.
and it makes no sense. It's just like, that was the other thing that made me question our dear doctor, is that, wait, no, you said it. Like, no psychiatrist would say, oh, this is a good idea. Sure, you're a damaged soul who, on top of being damaged from your abuse, you were captured by this monster. Yeah, I'm going to put you in a room with me.
I think that
I'm
was
gonna
the
lie
first
to you.
time we saw any indication that she might not be a psychiatrist. Because if we were to revisit that, we would know she is doing this because this is worth the greater good, and
Right.
the ends justify the means. It's okay to sacrifice one to save the lives of many.
Right.
She came in it with that mindset.
Yeah, and again, it was just, I was like, what's going on here with her? Like, it makes, other than Stockholm syndrome, that's the only thing that you can say, but it just didn't make sense, especially it being, like you said, only 3 years, if that, right? So I couldn't get her motivations. I couldn't get that character's motivations at all. The sons I got.
I mean, I think her character fell in love with Kevin, but empathized with Hedwig, so she overlooked the beast because of those other personalities that she was able to empathize with and form a bond with, especially when she opens up to him and says, I put my uncle in jail after the abuse. I understand what you went through. Let me help you. And she uses love and empathy as the connection with which to set him free.
Sure.
But then he's shot. So
Yeah.
it's so unsatisfying in a way.
It is. It was, and then it made me figure, well, can't he just turn into the beast and, like, sort of kind of Wolverine that bullet out?
Because
But-
they mentioned how he was shot twice before and he survived. He was
Yeah.
only shot once this time,
Yeah.
and that one bullet would destroy everything, even though he survived 2 in the past.
Apparently so. Apparently so.
That was the
in
one
this
part that
movie.
was unsatisfying. But even though I thought it was illogical for her to go back to him, I still enjoyed watching that dynamic. And if that dynamic weren't in the movie, I don't think it would have been as satisfactory for me. There was something about that dynamic that I appreciated, but I also got from it, then why didn't you just talk to him earlier and prevent the fight scene? It just doesn't make sense. The timing doesn't make sense. It's kind of like how at the end of any horror or psychological thriller, the cops come after the aftermath. So it felt like that to me.
I just felt, had she approached it with a little more horror,
Yeah.
I would have bought it more, but I just didn't understand so much what's going on in this dynamic. So
She was almost fearless.
yeah, and clueless. I don't know. It was weird for me, and to have that character show up the way she showed up. Because I could understand if she wanted to show up out of like, I want to make sure that he goes to jail for the rest of his life.
Right.
Whatever. That didn't happen. He gets shot, and you're right. It was just very
anticlimactic.
it really was.
You're building up to something and then it just falls flat. But I still enjoyed the movie.
He wasn't saved, and he wasn't like, I wanted to see this fight, which never really comes to great fruition. And then we have Glass. So Glass is the one that believes in abilities. He's a Professor X.
Yeah.
Okay. And he believes that people have abilities and wants to bring these abilities out into the world, out into the open so that people can realize what's going on. He's the mastermind of this entire thing. And he realizes that Crumb, that he actually created Crumb too, and he was going to say something, and he dies a very anticlimactic death. I mean,
yeah.
And again,
to just be like, you're already weak. You don't stand a chance when it comes to your bones, and you're just going to paralyze a man who's already a paraplegic.
And if I'm correct, he was given an opportunity in the hospital. It's like, well, we can do like an exoskeleton thing. We can almost cure you in a way. Well, if he's the mastermind, why wouldn't he have said yes to that? And then mastermind his way out of there, and he can walk and not have to worry about his bones breaking.
Yeah.
Like, why didn't you think of that, Glass? Like, what? So now we get to the I beat your foils, Shamrock cabal, because now the whole world is going to know about people with abilities. And we have a scene that takes place in the train station, okay? And the video goes viral, okay? And everybody's like, oh. And I'm like,
how would you even know who these people are to begin with, or the backstory? It was just...
I've seen viral videos before, and if I saw somebody bending a rut, I would just go, well, that looks fake.
Yeah.
And like everybody went into it just saying, wow, everybody, not one person said, oh, this is stupid. Like, that doesn't even look real.
Yeah.
And it didn't look real. So it was, again, that ending to me just didn't work. It felt so flat.
I actually really like the ending.
Why?
The reason I liked it was because we're kind of expecting one thing, and it's the only twist that I fully appreciated.
Sure.
Because even if Samuel Jackson's character had bad intentions in letting this be known to the universe,
okay,
I think it's great that you have a conclusion where even though these three people are dead,
right,
who are superheroes and supervillains who have extra strength in different dimensions, you finally let the entire world know that people like this exist, so that it defeats the whole purpose of the psychiatrist and the Shamrock organization, which when you look at it, that might be the person that all of them came to defeat after all, because you kind of talked earlier about the villain trope, how villains will come together to fight good, or how good people will come together to fight bad. But maybe the villains who came together were actually heroes that came together and had great consequences at the end, so that the world could know that superheroes exist.
On paper, that sounds fantastic.
It was just
as the
cheesy in
visual
execution.
medium, again, I want to talk about the movie cost $20 million. A lot of it was financed by M. Night Shyamalan himself, which, number one, I can respect. I can respect when a creator puts his money into something that he believes in. Now, he did have some Blumhouse. He did have Universal, one of the major 6 studios backing him in this. But investing in your own thing, most people would tell you don't do it. But this has already been established that through Unbreakable, through Split, did very well at the box office. So I appreciate the fact that he did that. But again, it was $20 million, and had a conversation, it was just about a week ago, with some of my Meet the Movie press colleagues about this, going, we wonder if he literally did have something staged to be in this high rise. But then budget comes, and it's like, I can't afford to do that.
Right.
Let's just use the front lawn and like have the fight.
That would
here.
actually make a lot of sense.
And it would.
20 million's not a lot.
20 million's not enough.
For an action movie, I mean, it would be a lot if it was something that was, character driven, or if it was something where, it doesn't need that. But this is something that requires a lot of special effects.
It does, but I'm going to bring up a movie that we were talking about just prior to the show. I was talking with Kevin, Upgrade, this movie that came out earlier in the summer. Not a lot of people saw this, but this movie had a smaller budget than Glass did. And it still worked in a visual medium via special effects, via the way that it was shot. Where here I felt that the fight scenes where the beast is like running across the lawn, it just looked fake. It didn't look real.
I was thinking that too. That's so funny you mentioned that, because the minute his hands went out and it looked like a cheetah running, I kind of started laughing a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was entertaining. I just was like, what is going on?
Then take this to the next step, which is the end, where you go, look at that on a cell phone, on a YouTube video, and it'll look even worse. Like, that's why I'm like, people can't be buying this, because it looks fake on a big screen to me.
Yeah.
And if they're watching it, I'm not buying that. Again, there's a lot of pessimism when it comes to social media and things, and I can just see people going, what the hell is this? That's not real.
Yeah.
And on to the next, kitty video.
So much skepticism of whether something is real or fake.
Right. And so then I'm saying, well, then Glass's intention didn't really work. But I want to go talk about, since we've dissected this plot and how it potentially worked or didn't work, which is fine. That's what opinions are all about. It's like, I don't dislike you or any more, or I appreciate open opinions. And I think Glass, if anything, much like Split, much like almost any M. Night Shyamalan movie, begs of discussion. Whether you like the movie, dislike the movie, it begs of a healthy discussion, of a breakdown of, well, this worked for me because, or this didn't work for me. I think Glass is a perfect example of that. And being that it $20 million to make, part of Blumhouse, which they make horror movies on the cheap. $20 million actually is high for them. So, and then Shyamalan films this in Philadelphia, it's where he's from.
Right.
He likes to film in his hometown. As with almost all of Shyamalan's films, Glass was shot in and around Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And one of the things to find perfect locations, his location manager, Stacy Hagenbaugh, who he'd work with on The Happening and The Visit. Now, see, The Visit, to me, is another really solid M. Night Shyamalan film that I had no expectations to, but worked out to be a pretty decent horror thriller movie.
See, I saw The Happening, but not The Visit.
The Visit's really good. At least I think so. So let's talk about the brick factory where the first house, where the cheerleaders are
Yes.
held captive, right? They scouted at least 25 potential brick factory options before we landed on one. And ultimately, it was the Frankfurt Arsenal, catch this, it was a former 19th century Army ammunition plant in Northeast Philadelphia, was where they filmed that. So that's pretty cool. There's maybe some Philadelphia history. The location was going to be, going on, a lot of stunt work, visual effects work, everything happening at the same time. I really thought that I felt that the brick, that brick factory, that fight scene to me was the most,
that was the best
it was the one that worked.
Yeah, and the one that was so hyped up, that had all the potential in the world, fell a little flat for me.
Well, I liked it too because, again, you hadn't seen Unbreakable, but you know that David Dunn, the overseer, we know what his power is. He hasn't met, or the beast hasn't met him yet. And as the beast is trying to kill him, whether it be crushing him, the beast is like going, what is up with this guy? Why can I not kill this guy?
Yeah.
What is, I need to know more about you. I like that dynamic of the fight. And I really did like that setting of the fight as well. And it worked. I like the claustrophobicness. Well, it was inside a building. So the beast could go up walls. And David and Dunn himself is like, Jesus, what is this thing? So again, I found it to be far more exciting. And then it abruptly comes to a halt. But I did like that. I did like that setting a lot for that scene.
Same here.
It worked. So then Shyamalan and Hagenbaugh, they spent some few days exploring hospitals, for the psychiatric hospital. So they found one 1913. It opened. So the hospital, the actual hospital, opened in 1913, closed in 2010. And at its peak in 1950, it housed more than 2,000 patients.
Wow.
At its peak. And they, which is pretty cool. Again, going, it had that old school kind of look.
The pink walls were so eerie.
Pink walls, yeah.
The scene where they're interviewing each of the Samuel Jackson, Bruce Willis, James McAvoy.
Yep.
There's something so unsettling about the pink walls.
Well, it's funny that you say that because that's what I was going to talk about. Because one room that provided a particular bit of inspiration was a former day room for the patients. And it was, so Hagenbaugh goes on, it was painted a bright Pepto-Bismol pink. It was pretty incredible. And
Pepto-Abysmal. Seriously.
It's very funny. And that was the day room. So they replicated the same look, that same pink room, one floor below it. So when they were building a set, and it became the most pivotal room in the hospital where Dr. Staple meets Dunn, Price, Crumb together for their group session. And again, if I'm looking at positives for the movie, the cinematography in this scene alone, the color palette was great because much like the poster, here we go. And
yes.
look what the pink is able to do.
Yeah.
Right? It's able to showcase each of the character's color perfectly. So you see the green, you see the yellow, and you see obviously Glass's purple blanket there. And I really felt that this captured the dynamic, the psychology of each character perfectly. And I really thought it was filmed really well. And the interaction of characters worked in that room.
And I think what's so brilliant about this is these are colors you would see in a nursery. If you had a baby in a crib, you would see pastel blue. You would see this pastel pink, this yellow. And I think it kind of shows how we have three key players that are so powerful that are being infantilized in this scene. And I love how the colors contribute to that dynamic of making them powerless and putting them in a circumstance where they have lost all power.
In a sense, yeah. And again, for those of you who are listening, we're just our wonderful producer Juliet. Thank you very much. She listens. She pays attention. And unfortunately, if you're listening to us right now, you can't see just the one scene. There's a still photo of the scene we're talking about. You can look it up online where they're in this Pepto-Abysmal room, but how each color purposely stands out to define the character wearing that color. And in part, it's really drawn out because it's in contrast to pink. So I really appreciated that from a production design and from a cinematography way. I really appreciated that scene a lot. I thought it was really beautiful. So, and color, I think, when you think about heroes and villains in superhero movies, the color in which they don is important. It really does help define the character that we're in.
And this is one of the few movies where we don't see like a bright red or like a royal blue or the stereotypical superhero. Right. We see colors that are not often utilized, in the Marvel universe or in the DC universe, and it kind of speaks to how M. Night Shyamalan has his own very unique style.
Absolutely, and again, whether you like the gentleman's movies or not, and it seems later in his career, a lot say no, and there are articles even written about the best thing that M. Night Shyamalan can do is stop writing his own scripts. Mm-hmm. So people feel that he has directing chops. Yeah. And he does. He knows how to work a camera. He knows visually how to make a scene look and how to make it flow. I do wish. I think the days of Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs may be gone. There was hope for me in The Visit, which I think is a very fun horror movie to watch with some really great performances by these kids and the people who are their grandparents. But yeah, I think that sometimes when you're funding, when it's your baby and you're funding it and you're not allowing other people to come in to try to tweak things, and I don't. Sometimes their ideas are good. I get it. A lot of people don't like interference, and sometimes the interference, they're not the best ideas in the world, but this one could have used a little bit of help, I think. In any case, so then we go into, again, like the color palette of the costumes. So we got purple, yellow, and gold. Not yellow, as I said. So it really defines each character without making it complicated.
Right.
It's a good visual cue.
I feel like purple, especially is a regal color. It's used with royalty. And in a sense, here's a man, Mr. Glass, who is virtually completely disabled.
Right.
And he's the one calling the shots. He's the one in power. He is the king out of the three. So I feel like that purple really mirrors the power that he holds.
Yeah. And according, and according to the costume, to designing this, costume designer Paco Delgado, we have these characters who, apart from being superheroes, they do, in a sense, well, except for the Horde, lead normal lives. We tried to find balance where superhero starts, where the human being finishes. It's two sides of the same character. So for example, when we want to dress David Dunn, we stick with the green palette. But it's much more subtle when he's wearing the green poncho. It's the same for the other characters as well. So the green, purple, yellow extend into the looks of each man's family member or surrogate family member as well. This created that visual connection between Dunn and his son, between Price and his mom, and Crumb and Casey Cooke. The key was to do it in a way that felt organic and subtle. And again,
I did not pick up on that.
Yeah, well, but I appreciate the color palette in dressing the characters and how they were filmed. Each one literally stood out as if everything else was just chromatic and they were the only ones in color.
Right.
And that I appreciate for what he was able to do. Now, we talked a little bit about the visual effects, and I think for the most okay, Juliet, that's a great scene.
Yeah, this is just beautiful.
Because again, it almost reminds me of the '84 Police album Synchronicity, in which the Police used a similar type of 3-scale color palette for their album and for various videos. And this showcases it here beautifully, where each character is in their mode of color. And it was used a lot. If you could bring up a poster, Juliet, that would be great too. And again, for those watching, I apologize. I understand, but visually, I want to show something and show there were aspects of this movie that I appreciated what Shyamalan and crew were going for. But it was also heavily used in the marketing. It was used in the posters, the color palette was, and
that's a great poster, by the way.
And it really is. And I believe, too, that Universal did a magnificent job in marketing this movie, because number one, it got me to go see it. That was number one, because after Split, I was like sort of kind of checked out, right? Their marketing from a trailer perspective, from a graphic perspective, from posters and everything, it made it look like this is going to be the anti-hero, superhero kind of, it was going to be different.
Right.
And I appreciated that. I thought the marketing was really solid, and that's why I went to go see this movie. Was actually, the marketing convinced me to do it. So kudos for Universal and their marketing team. And I walked out angry.
I think, but it's also the star power.
Sure.
I feel like when you get to see Samuel Jackson, Bruce Willis, we never see either of them anymore.
Die Hard with a Vengeance. Die Hard with a Vengeance. They're in that movie together.
And James McAvoy all come together in one movie.
Sure.
All three of these are phenomenal actors. James McAvoy, he is so versatile. He was in Atonement. He can do anything. And the fact that he shows this versatility within his character arc.
And look, and again, regardless of whether I liked Split or this movie, I cannot take away McAvoy's performance either, because the mere fact that he's able to change at the snap of a finger and do it, and then become completely another character. And in this movie, he didn't have the costume accoutrement to be that character, to walk into a room dressed as a
Patricia,
Patricia, a headmaster, a headmistress at he didn't have that
or a 9-year-old
so much.
boy, or someone who shifts from cerebral to an infant to anything he really wants to be, and he can do any accent. I was beyond impressed, and obviously, we saw Split, I was impressed with his performance in that.
You have to be.
But I feel in this movie, it showed even more because of the very fast-paced nature of switching while in the light.
Yeah, the strobe light scene, he was able to do it flawlessly. He was fantastic. I mean, he really is. He's a fine actor, but they all are.
Yeah, I have no complaints about the casting whatsoever. Even Anya Taylor-Joy.
I like
she's
Anya
rising star.
Yeah, I like it. I like her a lot. I've loved her since The Witch. And again, I even say the person who played. I'm going to look up the boy's name. The person who played Dunn's son, who was also in the original.
Spencer Treat Clark.
Okay.
Yes.
Hollywood, why aren't you using this guy more? I mean, he was good in this movie, and it was good. I get it. Sometimes when it's a little kid and they grow up, they don't become, they're not that little cute kid anymore, but he was still a good actor.
Yeah.
He was still, I really enjoyed seeing him there.
He's he's done a lot of television. He was in Mad Men, NCIS, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Criminal Minds, Animal Kingdom, but not a lot of film. I mean,
I would put him in feature. I felt that
he was in Gladiator though, in 2000. 20 years when he was a kid.
when he was a kid.
Yeah.
So, like, I really, really appreciate. I thought he was good. I had no real problems with, say, performance other than character motivations
Right.
going through, including Sarah Paulson, who I liked, but she had that undercurrent of evil to her. So, and then when you talk about the script and we talk about the writing, catch this. So M. Night Shyamalan says it was one of the quickest screenplays that he's ever written next to Signs.
He should have never said that. He should have
he goes,
never
maybe there
admitted
was
to that.
8 drafts. He said Signs was 6, so Glass might have been 7 drafts. You should have gone for 8. And again, he has to tie in something that happened 19 years ago, too, which isn't easy. And I thought it started off okay. So, and it's interesting that the author of this article, which comes from the Hollywood Reporter, says that Unbreakable, seemed somewhat as a disappointment at the time. I never looked at Unbreakable as a disappointment. Maybe from box office, and we can look that up. But I always felt that Unbreakable was one of his better films, and I was at that time too when it was coming out. I was heavily into reading more comics than I do today, and I completely got what he was saying, and I didn't need painful, like, ear-hurting exposition to do it.
Right.
So, it was really interesting about, like, what going from Unbreakable to this movie, and it's also interesting to learn that they tested Glass. They did test screenings of it. And he said that M. Night Shyamalan goes on and says that the test screenings were really crazy. We did them, and he says that the audiences went with them. They just were not polarized in any way by anything that we just mentioned.
Right.
And he says that this movie was one of the highest testing movies ever. And the thing we're talking about, the ending, was refreshing to them. So, which is interesting, because when you look at what the audience score on CinemaScore said, it was a B. That's not. It's a B.
Rotten Tomatoes did pretty well, though, audience-wise, not tomato meter-wise, but...
Tomato meter prices at a 36%.
Yes, 36% versus 77% audience score, which I totally understand, because they're not coming at this with the lens of, what's going on with the different plot points? How come this doesn't make sense? It's more like, is this an entertaining movie? How are the actors' performances?
They are, and I know the audience that I watched this with, they were totally... You could tell that they were Split fans and Unbreakable fans. So it was interesting. A couple did walk out. I don't understand why. I didn't think it was. Well, it made me angry, but I've never walked out of a movie. So
My
but
mom
it's
laughed a
interesting.
couple times. So.
Well, there you go. But when you look at us here, you liked the movie.
I did enjoy
it. I just didn't. So. And this is why I think those movies are great to talk about, because I think M. Night Shyamalan has that schism.
The Split.
And he has the split, so to speak, where some people buy what he's selling and other people are like, just stop already. and that's why it's worthy of the discussion. So I do want to talk about, so it cost, production budget was $20 million. Universal probably threw in another $40 to $50 million for marketing, prints, and advertising. Listen, advertising was all over the place for this movie. Whether you're in a movie theater, whether you're driving a car, watching TV, Glass was everywhere. So it wasn't that people didn't know that Glass was coming out. So in its opening weekend, on 3,841 theaters, $40 million. Now,
It already won back so much of its investment.
absolutely. Going into the weekend, though, if you were going to listen to a lot of the prognosticators who were saying $70 million, they were saying prior to going in. And as the days went on, well, it's going to do about 60. Well, it's going to do about
Oh, no.
55. Well, it's going to do about 50. And it came in at 40.
Do you think
So-
that the reviews negatively impact moviegoers from attending and watching?
I don't think they helped, being that Split, from a review standpoint, did so much better. But I don't think the reviews were going to keep fans of Split away.
Yeah.
I don't
Because that
think
was
so.
my motivation in going. I wanted to see how Split would come into this movie with
Right.
Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson, having
So-
not seen Unbreakable. I was very curious.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing here to talk about with its box office gross is that to date, domestically to date, it's at $54.5 million. Okay, that's not too shabby. But catch this, from a foreign standpoint, its foreign take is thus far at 53.9, let's just call it $54 million. It's almost split down the middle from a domestic and a foreign, but all in, worldwide, it's made $108 million already.
It's already, yeah.
That's, you can't be too upset if people don't like your movie, but yet they continue to pay, and worldwide box office is over $100 million so far. And 50, as you said, that's 54, you're almost at 20 million. You're almost at 3 times what the budget was right there.
Yeah.
Domestically. That's,
I think
That's
when
not
there's,
too shabby.
I think when something has star power behind it, and when it is an action movie, it performs so much better overseas because you're not relying on dialogue to understand a film. Even though this film requires understanding a lot of dialogue, so I'm
Well, here's
slightly
the thing.
confused that it performs so well.
But overseas, though,
Yeah,
you mentioned cast. Bruce Willis, Sam Jackson, James McAvoy. You have good cast that overseas, these people carry some weight.
superstars.
So I understand. And I believe overseas, too, Split did pretty well. I do have a breakdown of each movie. So let's start off Unbreakable, which opened up in 2000. Its final domestic gross was $95 million. I wouldn't really call that too much of a disappointment. Split, though, came in at $138 million domestic total. Now, its opening was $40 million as well. It was just below Glass's opening of 40.3. Split was 40. Split ended up at 138. Thus far, we're looking at a total of $54.5 million for domestic total of Glass. It's going into a weekend where it really does. It's a somewhat of a weak weekend for box office. There's not too much other choice.
A lot of people
really.
don't really watch the Oscar nominated or like the Golden Globe winning movies as much.
Well, they're out there, and there will be for the movies that were nominated that are still theatrically born. There'll be a bump. However, I think The Glass is still going to become number one. Even if it has a 60% drop, which is possible. It's not we're not into a holiday weekend anymore. You'd be talking, instead of 54, we're going to be doing maybe 23 million. 20 to 23,
Which is fine
depending.
because
And
he's
that'll
still
be
getting
70.
his investment back. He invested so much and he's actually getting that return.
He and Universal. So, the series as a whole has done very, very well. And, you can't knock the numbers. People enjoy the universe a lot. So, hey, who am I? It'll be interesting to see whether or not M. Night does say he can expand the universe if he wanted to. We'll see if that happens.
Would you be interested in watching future M. Night Shyamalan Unbreakable related?
Today I say no, because I like David Dunn. All those characters are dead.
What if it's an origin story? Well, this
But we
was
already
an
had
origin.
it. We've already had two origin stories. Today I say no. Then the marketing will come out and it'll probably grab me, and I'll be a sucker again, and then I'll go only to get pissed off. So, yeah, but today I say, you've done it. It's done. It's literally, we don't need it anymore, because it's just, I don't know. I just think the series, you capped it off. I don't think it, personally, you didn't cap it off in any particular great way. It'll make money. Go do another horror movie again. To do something, I don't know. I don't know. So
Psychological thriller would be fun.
he could do it. I mean, he's a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock, so, and you can see that in his directing, and that's why he always wanted to do the you know, everything was predicated on a twist. I think what happened, what I believe could have happened in his career after The Sixth Sense. After The Sixth Sense, everybody expected his next movie to have another twist. And it had another twist. And then his next movie. And everybody now goes in to an M. Night Shyamalan movie looking for the twist. And he has to figure out a way to become smarter than the audience. Because when you do it the first time, nobody's expecting it's a big twist, right? But to become creative at designing a twist that audience... that they believe audiences, oh, well, that's what you do, M. Night. He might want to like stop just doing twists and like make a movie. And that would, but then people would argue that then people would say, oh, well, it didn't have a twist. What kind of movie is this from him?
The twist is there is no twist.
Yeah, that's the twist. And I think he almost seems trapped into having to do twist. And I think he's a good visual enough of a director. It would be interesting. It would be also interesting to see him do movies that he didn't write. You know, like, why not? Like, you're a visually astute director. You could turn somebody else's work into something really cool. Like, why not do that? But I think part of it is he wants to have the control over what he does. So
I'd be interested to see a limited series on Netflix even.
Could happen.
Not even a feature, just shorter, something along the lines of what he's done, but just in a shorter format where there's a longer term investment.
Blumhouse is listening. That could happen. Yeah, why not? So, well, I think we've covered everything that there could be to cover in Glass. I believe so. We have a like, we have a dislike here. I think we broke it down from a production standpoint, from twists, plot twists, to fights. So, why don't you tell the audience who you are, what you do, how they can find you on the social medias?
Hey everyone, I'm Mina Wahab. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Mina Makes Magic, and go to my website to see all of my reporting and hosting at minawahab.com or minamakesmagic.com.
That's fantastic. Mom, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mom.
You were great. Did that phone call go okay? Everything go all right in that call? You don't need to apologize. Don't need to apologize whatsoever. You lightened up the show. So thank you for not falling asleep. Thank you, audience, for not falling asleep. Again, my name is Demetri Panos here on Anatomy of the Movie. You can also find me on Popcorn Talks, Meet the Movie Press, and on the Twitters at DMovies1701. I appreciate your support. Appreciate you watching. These upcoming weeks, hey, we just had the Academy Award nominations. So we're going to do our best to try to get in as many of the nominated movies under the best category or best actor, actress, and all that. So we have a lot of nominated films that we're going to want to talk about before the Academy Awards. This is a slow week at the box office. Next week looks to be sort of slow. So we're going to have plenty of time to do some backfill, so to speak. And then, but we have a rest of the year, and there's tons of movies coming out, and we'll be here as your guide. We'll be here as your guide. And please feel free to comment on YouTube, Apple. We're on with Spotify.
Yeah.
We're on Spotify, guys. Spotify, that's crazy to me. I would unsubscribe personally. Anyways, thank you very much for watching, listening, and being here with us. Julia, thank you very much for being our awesome producer with all the visual aids and help that you did. It was awesome. Thank you all. Have a good day.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of its owners or principals.